Hey Art Nerds! Today we are putting the Milo Art Markers to the Nattosoup Studio Fieldtest, and we're going to make this really cute illustration. So today's video kind of combines two things. It's going to be a walkthrough for how you can create your own very cartoony illustration using limited colors, and it's also going to be a field test for these Milo Art Markers. So those Milo Art Markers were sent to me by the wonderful Taira. I'm going to have a link in the description below where you guys can check out her Instagram. She makes some beautiful art, and I'd like to thank her so much for sending them to me. When people send me things like this, it really helps the channel out, so I greatly appreciate it. So the first thing I'm going to want to do is I'm going to select my colors for this illustration. Now we're using limited colors and we're going to be making a lot of use of the white of the paper. Now I'm going to be doing this field test in my Strathmore 300 series Bristol sketchbook. This is the same sketchbook you guys saw me do my swatches on, as you can see right here, as well as my blendability test. And I do almost all of my field tests on this paper, and this allows me to give you guys consistent feedback on what I think of different brands of markers. I also want to point out that I recently spoke to Gerald at Milo. He saw my Instagram post about wanting to compare my Milo Art Markers to some of their higher end pro markers, and he offered to send me some. So I can't wait to get back to you guys with a comparison video on that. I hope you guys will look forward to that. So right now I'm selecting my colors, and I'm kind of just doing a quick selection of what I might want. The colors I ended up using in this tutorial, and that's all the colors, not just the ones that I show here, are 67 pastel blue, 25 salmon pink, 84 pastel violet, 45 canaria yellow, 32 deep yellow, 34 yellow, 22 French vermilion, 14 vermilion, 64 Indian blue, 11 carmine, 87 azalea purple, 103 potato brown, and 94 brick brown. So those are all of the colors that I'm going to use in this image. I also want to let you guys know that if you check the description down below, you will find a transcript of the most important meats of this video. So if you're not really a listening person, you're more of a reading person, I have that information down in the description below. And I would like to take a moment to thank my wonderful art nerds over on Patreon. Their support allows me to continue to make and produce videos like this, and when necessary, to go out and purchase the materials that I need. So a huge thank you to my wonderful art nerds on Patreon. So this is my rough selection of colors. I have my illustration in my Strathmore sketchbook. This was inked with a Sakura Pigma FB brush pen. I talk about those all the time here on this channel. They are alcohol marker proof. So we're going to start with Cara Skin Tone. And I felt like when I was selecting my colors, I noticed that there were no light pinks really suitable for a skin tone blush, and that the skin pink is kind of a weird color. And despite having 48 colors, I felt really limited with the color selection because so many of those colors are taken up with the gray tones. There's also no colorless blender, so if I need to use one, I'm going to use my Copic colorless blender. And I am applying our pastel blue number 67 to the whites of her eyes and to her teeth. It's a little bit darker than I would want. I would really want a pastel for this. Also want to point out that the caps don't really match the color swatches well, so I'm going to be referencing my swatch sheet, and this is why I recommend you guys create your own on the paper that you wish to use. So I also noticed the lightest skin tone is kind of neon, and it's a bit too saturated for a light skin tone. And when it blends out with a Copic colorless blender, it blends out somewhat out of control and bleedy. And the color bleeds on this paper even without a blender, which is unusual. I've reviewed dozens of alcohol markers over the years, and I've been using the Strathmore 300 series sketchbook as sort of my quality control, my test, and I have not encountered too many markers that bleed without provocation on this paper, but the Milo markers do. I am coloring in just the shaded area, so I'm leaving the white as kind of the highlight on her skin. So we're shading in beneath her bangs, underneath her eyebrows, above her eyelids, the interior of her ears, her nose, as well as the shadow cast by her nose, her lips, or at least the bottom lip, and underneath her chin. And I'm going to attempt to blend this out a little bit because I wanted to create kind of an in-between mid-tone between the color that we used, which is salmon pink, number 25, and the white of the paper. But unfortunately, that really caused more bleeding and it caused more problems than it really solved for me. So with these markers, I wouldn't really recommend using a colorless blender because it really activates the colors and it really pushes them all over the place. So next I applied, and I guess I missed it on camera, I apologize for that. Next I applied the skin tone pink, or the peach pinky color, the blushy color. It is number 84, Pastel Violet, which is really more of like a lipstick pink. I applied circles of that to her cheeks, to her lips, and to her fingertips. And now I'm filling in kind of the Warner Brothers style circle. I've been seeing a lot about Sonic lately and the new Sonic movie and the new Sonic designs, so I guess I really have Sonic on the brain. Just admitting that here. I am applying pastel blue, number 67, so the same blue we used for her eyes, in the circle that's around her. And this is very Looney Tunes / Warner Brothers. Next, I am going to color in the letters on her name, and I'm using Canary Yellow, Deep Yellow, and Yellow to do this. So 3 different yellows because I wanted to create a yellow to orange ombre effect. And you guys will see I went and I applied all 3 colors, and then I'm going to blend in between them using the prior color. So you guys will see what I mean in just a moment. So I'm blending the transition between Canary Yellow and Deep Yellow out with Canary Yellow. And I will be blending the transition between Deep Yellow and Yellow out with Deep Yellow. And this is why we really have to swatch. Color names are not entirely accurate, entirely indicative of the colors used. Now you guys might be noticing that I'm getting some bleeding outside of the line work. Now this is a thirsty paper. This is a paper that can handle a lot of saturation. It can handle a lot of layers. It can handle a lot of color. And I'm still having bleeding and control issues with these markers. Now, I'm not entirely sure if it is the fiber brush tip that the Milo Art Markers use, and having a different tip would change my experience with these markers, or if it's the inks themselves that they use. A friend of mine is trading me her shuttle art markers for my Milo art markers just for review purposes. I'm going to be returning the shuttle markers once I've done a quick review and field test. So that'll give me a better idea of whether it is the brush tips used here or the ink itself, since we're pretty sure that those markers are the same markers with different branding. So I'm trying to clear up some of the blending using the Copic colorless blender, with mixed results. So for the 7-inch at the top, since this is the title of my comic, 7-inch Kara, it's about a really cute 7-inch tall little girl named Kara, and you guys can read it at 7inchkara.com or 7inchkara.tumblr.com. The first 5 chapters are free. Anyway, for the 7-inch, I am using 34 yellow, 22 French vermilion, and 14 vermilion. And I'm using the same sort of blend out ombre technique for these characters as well. So blending out with the prior color. I've also noticed that the blue, number 67 pastel blue, is sort of starting to fray already. I noticed that while I was filling in the circle around Kara. Now these markers haven't been used too much, so that amount of fraying this early in is actually pretty common for fiber tip markers, and it's why I prefer the foam, one of the reasons why I prefer the foam rubber nibs. They just tend to last a lot longer. And colors, especially the yellows, oranges, and reds, blend into one another fairly easily, although on Kara, there's a little bit of a harsh delineation that requires more working, which I go back in later on in this video and I finish kind of working that delineation out. And I chose to do a very cartoony illustration with a limited color palette because I was frankly kind of challenged by the colors that Milo chose to include in the 48 color set. Now they do offer a larger set with a bullet nib and a chisel. I talk about that a little bit more in my unbox and swatch review for this video. So I'm going back into the blue with number 64, Indian blue. This is a slightly darker blue than our 67, pastel blue. And I'm trying to do a gradiated transition between the lighter blue and the darker blue. So Kara has freckles, and originally I'd selected a darker sort of skin tone colors to do freckles on top of her skin tone, but I decided to just utilize our salmon pink color, number 25, to do freckles onto the white. So for her hair, I'm handling it a little bit differently than I normally do. I'm trying something different. I know, unusual for me. And I am using number 103 potato brown to apply my first layer. And I'm going to go over that with number 94 brick brown. And when I was applying Kara's freckles, I noticed that the tip had already gone mushy, and I was finding it very hard to control, which is a problem because we're working fairly large, for me at least, and that sort of mushy tip is going to be very difficult to control if you're coloring something small, like if you do comic pages or if you do smaller illustrations, things like that. So kind of depending on what I think of the Milo Pro markers, I may have to recommend those over these, but I do find the mushiness of the tips to be a little bit frustrating to deal with. I also find it difficult to get into small places with these markers. The brush tip, it doesn't have any real flex, it doesn't have any real give to it, so you really can't get as much control as you would like. It is really good though for filling large areas quickly and without as much streaking as we would get if we had a bullet nib or if we were trying to use the chisel nib for this. So I do think the brush nib does have a place, just perhaps maybe we need a bullet nib in addition to the brush nib. So now I'm going in and adding shadows with number 95, brick brown. So for her eyes, I leave just kind of a little crescent moon of the lighter potato brown. And then for her hair, I'm going to be leaving it mostly potato brown and using this brick brown for mainly just filling areas in and for creating shadows and creating depth. So to color in her mouth, I used number 14 Vermilion, and I felt that I couldn't really get the color as dark as I would want. There isn't really a darker red other than Carmine, so I layered on top of it with number 87 Azalea Purple. So I think this illustration turned out really cute. I really like how I used it, but it was more like if you were doing an art challenge where you were working with something kind of frustrating and you liked how that turned out, rather than me being able to say, oh, I really recommend Milo Art Markers. They'll allow you to make great art. I don't really feel that way. I feel like I kind of struggled to use these markers. I had to use a lot of my alcohol marker experience and knowledge to get what I wanted from these, and that's not really something you want when you are looking for markers for younger artists, which is kind of how I'm seeing these markers marketed. So the pros for these is the brush fills areas quickly and with less streaking than a bullet or a chisel nib. There is solid marker build outside of the brush. The markers themselves are built quite well. Good ink flow and attractive marker design, and these are very affordable for alcohol markers. The cons are that the brush has no flex. The brush frays fast. There's no fine application method once the brush is shot. Colors bleed a lot more than other markers that I've reviewed. The color selection is strange and feels incomplete. It seems wasted with so many warm and cool grays. There are not enough pastels, and the skin tones are weird. And the Pro may solve some of these brush issues. I will get back to you guys with that comparison in the future. So my verdict, without having tried the Pro markers, if they actually feature a foam rubber brush nib, a lot of my issues with these Milo markers would be solved, and it would be easier to recommend these markers. I feel like a lot of these markers definitely have, or rather, I feel like these markers do have a place on the market, but there's so many similar cheap alcohol markers available. I can't necessarily say that these are the best, so take this recommendation, this review kind of with a grain of salt. There are a lot of markers like these markers on the market. They're certainly not the worst I've ever reviewed, and even a bad brush tip goes a long way towards making decent art. According to my fellow art nerd, Allie, who owns a set of the Shuttle Art markers and will let me borrow them for an upcoming review, so keep an eye out for those, Shuttle Art and Milo markers have the same bodies and color system, so these may be the same markers just rebranded. And that's kind of how I feel about a lot of the markers that are being sold on Amazon right now. I'm curious to know if they're just manufactured by the same factory in China, resold and rebranded. There are, so if you're looking for affordable alcohol markers that handle well, I still recommend the Blick Studio brush markers over what Amazon has to offer. And I'll show you guys in a couple of minutes. I have a side-by-side comparison. Right now I'm just kind of tweaking things, adding some shadows, adjusting the line art, and generally just trying to make it look cuter and more attractive, which is every artist's goal. I also would not recommend these as a Copic marker dupe. So I'm seeing a lot of parents ask about these, a lot of teachers, a lot of librarians ask about these. So if you guys have any experience with affordable alcohol markers from Amazon, please let me know which ones you like in the comments below, because I get asked about these a lot, and I want to be able to point parents and teachers in the right direction. So now I'm just going in with a little bit of Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White. That's a white ink. And I'm just going to use this to add some accents and highlights using a small watercolor brush. And I love when I finally get to add the shinies to the eyes, because that's when my art really seems to come to life. That's when the character just seems to jump from the paper, and she really looks a lot like Sonic in this. So if you guys haven't had a chance yet, it would really mean a lot to me if you'd read 7-Inch Kara. The first 5 chapters, like I said, are available for free at 7inchkara.com and 7inchkara.tumblr.com. You guys will be able to find links in the description below, just like you'll be able to find a transcript of all the important talking points in this video down below in case you guys want to re-review it. And I'm really looking forward to hearing what Amazon alcohol markers you guys recommend. Do you happen to really like the Milo Art markers? Should we really be recommending the Milo Pro markers instead? I've also been kind of eyeballing the Art and Fly markers. I know the Frugal Crafter uses those, and she's made some really gorgeous art with them. So I wouldn't mind borrowing a set to see if they can kind of stand up to the Nattosoup Fieldtest challenge, kind of meet my very rigid requirements for alcohol markers. All right, so this piece is just about finished. I think she turned out really cute, and this is a really good way to utilize a limited collection of markers, whether you're using the Milo Art markers or Copic markers or Blick Studio brush markers or Prismacolor markers. Being able to make the most with what you have is a big part of being an artist. Don't feel like you have to have the biggest collection of colors. What's more important is markers that work with you to make the kind of art that you want to make. So I mentioned a little bit earlier in the video that the Milo Art markers are not my favorite affordable Copic marker dupe. I stand by the Blick Studio brush markers. These are very inexpensive compared to Copics. They're about $2 to $3 a marker each, which I know seems expensive, but they are refillable. You can replace the nibs in them, and you can get them at the link in the description below. So I hope you guys found this video to be helpful, useful, and informative. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope you guys maybe learned a few things. If you did, would you please do me a huge favor and share this video with your friends? Help them learn more about using alcohol markers. It would help me out a lot, and let me know what you guys think in the comments below. The only sponsor for this video are my wonderful Artnerds on Patreon, so I really want to give them a huge shout out and a thank you. Taira, whose art I'm going to link in the description below, and my phenomenal fiance Joseph, who also helps make these sort of reviews possible. Thank you guys so much. I truly appreciate it. We're not sponsored by Audible. We're not sponsored by NordVPN. None of those guys want anything to do with small YouTubers. So if you love this kind of content, be loud, be proud, let us know, and join me over on Patreon. I had a lot of fun recording this tutorial. Thank you guys so much for watching, and have a wonderful day, guys. Bye!